Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're continuing with our series of YouTube videos to help you play better chess. One of the most important issues in chess is called thought process. Thought process isn't the content of what you're thinking, like analysis would be. For instance, analysis is part of the thought process. Thought process is a process. It's kind of what you are going to do in order to get that content. So a lot of times people say to me, my thought process is really poor. I need some steps that I can go through. Can you give me some steps? And good players don't think that way. They might have steps in their mind, but they don't think of them as steps. They just think, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and they just know what they have to do. It's sort of like telling someone, I'm going to give you the steps you need to go through in your head in order to walk. Well, you might have consciously thought of those steps when you were young, but now that you know how to walk, you don't sit there and go, well, which muscle do I move next and which leg do I move next? It just comes out automatically, and that's how good players think. But weaker players who have a poor thought process sometimes need some sort of guides. And I tell them, well, there are no real guides, and if I gave you a guide, it might be good in position A, which is very analytical, and it might be kind of worthless in position B, where not much is going on. And they say, I don't mind. Give me something to think about anyway. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to kind of go through an overview of some of the mega steps in thought process. And if that helps you by knowing what these steps are, that's fine. But in the long run, you really don't want to say, step 1, Dan said to do this, step 2, Dan said to do that, because it really doesn't work that way. And that actually ends up making it harder for you. But if understanding what the steps are involved is going to be helpful, then sure, let's go ahead and do something like that. So with that introduction, I'm going to go through the steps, and I'm going to go through 2 completely different types of positions to kind of show you how it would work in different types of positions. So here are the 5 steps before we look at our first position. And the first step is, what are all the things my opponent's trying to do? That includes what are all the things his last move does, because he could have done something on the last move which does 6 different things, but there might be some things left over from the previous move that you have to take care of. For instance, suppose he attacked your queen, and then you checked him, and then he got out of check, and you say, what are all the things his last move does? Well, your queen is still attacked. You can't just look at the way he got out of check. You have to say, oh, and my queen is still attacked from the previous move. So you're not just interested in what are all the things that the last move does. You're also interested in what are all the things he's trying to do, period. The second question would be, the second step would be, what are all the things I'm trying to do? Now, why do you do the opponent first before you do what you're doing? Well, that's because when it's your turn to think, he's just made a move which changes the information on the board. So that information is changed with regard to his side, since it's his move. So you ask first, what are all the things he's trying to do? Then you ask, what are all the things I'm trying to do? The third step is, based on all the things he's trying to do and all the things I'm trying to do, what are the candidate moves that would make sense? A candidate move is a move that you're considering, but to a greater extent, a candidate move is something that does something. Well, what does it do? Well, it tries to achieve some sort of aim that you're trying for, or tries to prevent some sort of aim that your opponent is trying for. Those would be candidate moves. So that would be step 3. Identify what candidate moves go along with step 1 and step 2. The next step would be, which of those candidate moves are safe? In other words, if I make this move and he makes a check, capture, or threat, can I safely meet that move? Because if I can't, then either my move is going to have to be a sacrifice, or I'm going to have to get rid of that candidate move. So you have to know which of the moves that do things are safe. And the last step, which is by far the most comprehensive and difficult and takes entire books to talk about, is, now that I have my set of moves that I'm going to strongly consider, which one is the best? Which one, if we assume that both sides make the best moves, would lead to the position that I like the best? And that's worth 20 videos in itself just for step 5. But as for today, we're not going to necessarily go all the way through the parts of step 5. We're just going to say that once you've done those first 4 steps, the 5th step is the big one. And if grandmasters think for 20 minutes, they probably spend 20 seconds on the first 4 steps and 19.5 minutes on step 5. But lower rated players can't do that. They need to take a little bit more time on those first 4 steps because it's not so automatic for them. Okay, so let's take a position. And what I did is I went to one of my favorite books, which is Winning Chess Exercises for Kids by Jeff Coakley, which I consider the best intermediate tactics puzzle book that exists, and Jeff's answers are wonderful. But one of the things that makes the book so good is that not every position in the book is a tactics position. Now, he tells you which ones are not, white to play and win, so it's not like you're going to be surprised by that. It's always in the same part of each section of his pages. But this is one of those positions which is not necessarily white to play and win. It's just white to play. And generally I tell my students, if I don't want to tell them what the objective of a puzzle is, I'll just say white to play and do the best he can. That's not as much information as white to play and win. It's not as much information as white to play and mate. It's not as much information as white to play and mate in 3. It's not as much information as white to play and draw. But you have to figure out by looking at the board, gee, white's losing. If I could get a draw, that'd be awfully wonderful. Maybe this is a white to play and draw problem. So here it's white to play and do the best he can. And let's go through each thing. Well, the question is, what are all the things black's trying to do? Now, when you see a puzzle like this, you don't know what the last move was. But I can kind of bet that the last move was to move the knight to b4 from either a6 or c6. That would be my guess, that black just played knight to b4. Why is that my guess? Because white has what's called the bishop pair. The bishop pair is when you have 2 bishops and your opponent doesn't. And in the average position, as measured by Larry Kaufman through his measuring a couple 100 million positions with the computer, the bishop pair is worth, on the average, about half a pawn. Now, it takes roughly a pawn advantage to have a winning advantage, so having the bishop pair puts you half the way already toward winning. And if it's the kind of position where the bishop pair is very, very strong and it's worth way more than half a pawn, it is entirely possible that having the bishop pair is a winning advantage all by itself. Not usually, but it is possible. So here, white has the bishop pair, but black is threatening, and I say threatening in quotes because it's not necessarily a tactical threat, but he's threatening to play knight takes d3, queen takes d3, and win that half a pawn back. So when we're listing what's black trying to do here, one of the highest things on the list is he's trying to get rid of that bishop pair, and if not, he's trying to do other things, like maybe get the knight off of c6 so that he can move the c pawn up and overprotect the d pawn so his queen and his knight on f6 don't have to sit there and watch it. So black is trying to get rid of that bishop pair. He's trying to overprotect the d pawn. And he's also trying to make his king safer because that bishop on d3 has an eye on h7 where there could be some pressure coming up later if white can get his queen to the king side. So those are some of the things that black's trying to do. What's white trying to do? Well, sometimes what you're trying to do as white is the opposite of what black's trying to do. White's trying to not lose the bishop pair. He's trying to preserve the bishop pair. So that's obvious. He's also trying to take advantage of the fact that he has 2 central pawns, E and D against just D. He has a semi-open file. One of the things both sides are trying to do is get their rooks into the game. Right now the rooks are doing nothing. So we've got to get the rooks into the game. Maybe white later will play a move like f3 and then play e4 to get his extra pawn on the king side rolling. If he plays e4 without playing f3, black will simply take it and isolate white's d pawn. And obviously white can't even do that right away because it might not be safe. The d pawn's not even guarded right now. So white later might be trying to play something like f3 and e4. So we got a lot of things white's trying to do. Get his rooks in the game, preserve the bishop pair, maybe get that pawn up to f3 and e4 once that's possible. Maybe take advantage of pressure on the c file. All right, so what are the candidate moves? Well, can we play bishop? We're always looking at checks, captures, or threats. Can we play bishop takes h7 check? He's got it guarded with a knight and a king. Doesn't look good. That's not a candidate. Queen h5 to get up to h7. No, he could just take my queen with a knight. Not a candidate. So if I just develop a rook and put a rook on the semi-open file with rook ac8, he's going to play knight takes d3 and get rid of my bishop pair. So let's look at candidate moves that save the bishop pair. Bishop f5, not safe. Bishop c2, not safe. c4, a6, not safe. e4, not safe. So we've got bishop b5 and bishop b1. Well, superficially, bishop b5 attacking the queen looks better than bishop to b1. And we could look at it later when we get to step 5. But those are candidate moves: bishop b5, bishop to b1. All the other candidate moves we looked at so far failed to step 4, which are they're not safe. Rook a c1 is safe, but it loses half a pawn on the bishop pair. So whether you consider that safe or not, we could say that there's an asterisk on step 4 for a move like rook a c1. It's quote safe, but not really the kind of safety that we want. So now we would be at step 5, where we would compare our candidate moves. And let's say the final candidate moves are bishop b5 and bishop b1. Well, I'm not going to go through all the comparisons, but the problem with bishop b5 is black has what's called an AWL. Attack it with something worth less. If you're not familiar with AWL, maybe I should do an entire video on AWL. You don't want to let people do things to AWL you. If you let them AWL you, you better have some good squares to go to. And after bishop b5, c6, the only safe square for the bishop where he can't take it at all would be bishop a4, and then maybe he could even play b5. If I play bishop b3, he could play a4. And then my bishop would have to go all the way back to d1, where it's really kind of doing nothing. On the other hand, if I play bishop to b1, which is also safe, that's better, because even though it blocks in the rook, that's just temporary. After I play bishop to b1, all my pieces are safe. He can't get to them. Then I could play a later a3, drive the knight away, and then I could move the bishop back to, let's say, c2, which would let the rook in the game, and then the queen could maybe go to d3 and threaten the king's side. So bishop b1 only blocks the rook temporarily. My plan is to play a later a3, move the bishop off b1 to either a2 or c2 or something like that, and then get the rooks back into the semi-open files and maybe even play f3 and e4. So that would be my content of my process, but the process itself would be, what are all the things but he's trying to do, what are all the things I'm trying to do, what are my candidate moves, which ones are safe, and then I compare them, say which ones I like best. So here, my final candidate moves were bishop b5 and bishop b1, and even though superficially bishop b5 looks much better than bishop b1, because bishop b5 attacks the queen and bishop b1 blocks in the rook, it's actually the reverse. Bishop b5 is met by the 8, which is an AWL itself, the bishop attacking the queen, is met by a counter AWL, c6, and then I just have to run the bishop away, and there's no great places to put it. While on bishop b1, I'm super safe. After a3, I can regain my c2 and d3 squares, and I can finish my development well, and I've got that nice bishop pair. Later on, maybe I could do something like play bishop takes f6, and if black plays bishop f6, I can play queen h5, threatening mate. And then if his knight is already driven off of b4, I'm threatening h7 and d5, and maybe I could win a pawn. Why can't I do that right away? Well, on bishop takes f6, queen h5, he just plays knight takes d3 and stops the mate by taking off his bishop. So if I want to do something like that, I got to start with bishop to b1. All right, that's a relatively straightforward kind of calm example, but that's okay, because calm is more the norm in chess. Let's go to the opposite, and let's take a position for one of my students' games, which is anything but calm. All right, let's bring it up. It's number 3, I think. Okay, white to play. All right, well, what are all the things that black's trying to do? Well, now we've got some big things he's trying to do. And as I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, I'm not going to move the pieces around the board, because in a game you can't do that. I'm just going to mention the moves that we have to be careful for. So we're looking for black's checks, captures, and threats. Well, here he's got a ton of them. All right, he's got queen takes f2 check. He's got knight takes f2, winning the pawn and forking the queen on e4 and the rook on h1. He's got queen takes c3 check. He's got queen takes d6. And who knows, you might even have rook e8 attacking my queen and putting pressure on the e-file, although I have an e2 pawn, so he's not pinning the queen to the king. So the main 4 things that black has here that white has to be careful about is queen takes d6, queen takes c3 check, queen takes f2 check, and knight takes f2. If we count the material, black is up a pawn, but white has the bishop pair, which is worth about half a pawn. But white right now, 4 out of white's 6 non-pawns are not developed. The rook on a1, the king, the bishop on f1, the rook on h1. Black has a lot more open lines for his pieces, although black can't castle here. His king is on d8, and of course he started the game on e8, so he can't castle. All right, now let's look at all the things that white might be able to do. What are all the white's checks, captures, and threats? Well, the first thing I notice is White can play queen takes a8. There's a hanging rook on a8. Queen takes g4, not possible because bishop takes g4. He has checks on e7, which are guarded twice. If I check with the bishop, forking his king and his queen, he's got it attacked twice. I've only got it guarded once. I could play bishop c7 check, forcing him to move his king again. That would be a bishop sacrifice. If he takes it, the question is whether I would get anything out of that. So those are, and queen e8 check is a check, but he would just take it off. Now I have a skewer, bishop to e5, skewering the queen to the rook on h8, but again, he's got two pieces on it. He's got a knight and a queen attacking the e5 square. So, but those are all ideas. It's important to go through the evaluation of the position. In this case, black has an extra pawn for the bishop pair, and all the both sides checks, captures, and threats. So you sort of have a list in your mind of all the things they're doing. So now we kind of have an idea. What are all the things black's trying to do? What are all the things white's trying to do? Now we have to start coming up with candidate moves to see whether or not they make any sense. Well, all of our checks are going to be candidate moves, although we can probably cross queen e8 check off the list. It just doesn't do anything. But bishop e7 check looks bad, but who knows? Bishop c7 check looks bad, but who knows? Queen takes g4, we can probably cross that off the list. Queen takes a8's got to be on the list as a candidate move. And then we have candidate moves that if we don't like our offensive moves, we'll stop his moves. So we got to look for candidate moves for white that would stop queen takes c3 check, queen takes f2 check, knight takes f2, and queen takes d6. And it turns out that there are some. Now, if you want to stop the video and figure out what they are, great. Otherwise, I'm just going to tell you because we don't have that much time today to go through how you would find these. But one of those candidate moves would be queen to d4. Queen to d4 blocks the attack on c3. It guards f2 a second time so that knight takes f2 and queen takes f2 can be met. And it guards the bishop on d6. There's also another defensive move that white could play that comes into consideration, and that's queen to f3. Queen to f3 blocks the attack on f2 so that knight takes f2 and queen takes f2 are not a problem. It guards c3, but it allows queen takes d6. Why is that possible? Well, it's possible because white has moves like rook to d1, pinning the queen to the king on the d file. If queen f3, queen takes d6, rook d1 might be okay. Another possibility for white after queen f3, queen d6, instead of pinning the queen to the king, would be to now play queen takes a8. So queen f3 is a candidate move. So we have candidate moves, bishop c7 check, bishop e7 check, queen f3, queen d4, queen takes a8. Those would all be candidate moves. If we had a candidate move like f3 and we use the is it safe criterion, we would see if we play f3, that makes the f2 square safe, but now he still has moves like queen takes c3 check. And then our only legal move there is king d1, and now black at the very least could play queen takes a1 check and get a pawn and a rook with check, which would be enough to already eliminate f3. And it turns out after f3, queen takes c3 check, king d1, black doesn't even have to play queen takes a1 check because he's got knight f2 checkmate, which happens to fork the king and the queen and the rook, but it doesn't matter because it's checkmate. So f3 is going to be eliminated as not safe. All right, but what about bishop c7 and bishop e7? Well, they don't look safe either, but we haven't really calculated them. Maybe if you play a move like bishop e7 or bishop c7, you got to go further. Remember, we had an earlier video on quiescence errors. If you just look at bishop c7 and say, I can't do that, he'll take it, then you don't realize that, well, maybe then I can play queen a8, or maybe I can play rook a7 check, or whatever you can do. You have to look a little further because there might be more checks, captures, or threats. So that's going to be true about bishop to e5 and bishop to e7. They're superficially not safe, but until we really analyze them deeper to see if they work, we don't know. Okay, so step one, what are all the things black's trying to do? Queen takes c3 check, queen takes f2 check. Knight, in this case, it's mostly tactical. Knight takes f2, queen takes d6, maybe save the rook on a8, maybe play rook e8. What are all the things white's trying to do? Well, he's trying to stop all the things black's trying to do. He's trying to do something offensive, take advantage of that king on that can't castle. He's maybe trying to take advantage of that hanging rook on a8. He's got lots of things he's trying to do. So we've got candidate moves. And the problem in these kind of tactical positions is the ones that superficially look not safe might actually be quite reasonable, because there may be sacrifices in positions like this. This is a kind of a crazy, wacky position. All right, so step 5 is, which move is the best? And again, we would look at the candidate moves. If we look at the purely defensive candidate moves, and we're not going to do this in any great depth because, we don't have the time, and it's outside the scope of this video. But if we look at the two candidate moves, queen d4 and queen f3, if we look at what black might do against them, black's up a pawn for the bishop pair. So he would love to trade queens here, especially since his king is out in the open and he can't castle. So if white plays queen d4, if worse comes to worse, black's just going to play queen takes d4, c takes d4. And what that does for black is it makes both the white c pawn, which is now on d4, and the black pawn on c4 protected past pawns. The pawn on c4 is already protected, and the pawn on d4 can easily be protected with a move like e3, or maybe white will play d5 and e4. The problem is black has 3 connected past pawns after that, the a, b, and c pawn, and he's already in the endgame where connected past pawns are really strong. So after queen d4, queen takes d4, c takes d4, white has stopped all of black's threats, and he can breathe easy, but black's in a really good endgame. So if you see a move like that and you analyze it, and you say, wow, good, he's not going to kill me with queen takes c3 and queen takes f2 and knight takes f2 and queen d6, queen d4 stops everything. Well, it does. The problem is it gives you a probably lost endgame. So when you see moves like that, you go, okay, that remains on my candidate list, but I'd really like to find a better move than queen to d4. I really would, because even though it does most of the things I want to do, which includes stopping all of his really dangerous threats, it still leaves me with a bad position. Queen f3, on the other hand, is a little more promising. After queen f3, we've already seen that queen takes d6 is not much of a threat due to rook d1 or maybe queen takes a8. But if black trades queens, notice when white recaptures with the pawn, that knight on g4 doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. For instance, suppose he goes to f6. Well, okay, but then white has a pin, bishop e5, which looks interesting. And he might even have other moves. So maybe, and now that pawn on c4 is not passed like it is after queen d4, queen takes d4, c takes d4. After queen f3, queen takes f3, let's say g takes f3, knight f6, white's down a pawn, but black's pawns aren't nearly so menacing. So even though that doubles my pawn, that would, on the f-file, that would be superficially a bad way of looking at it. If you say, if I play queen d4, queen takes d4, c takes d4, that's better than queen f3, queen takes f3, g takes f3, because one way I have a double pawn and the other way I don't. That would be pretty bad evaluation, superficial evaluation of the position, because you really do have other things going on there. Well, let's look at some of the offensive moves. We've already seen queen a8 loses to queen c3 check, so we can't take the rook. What about those bishop checks? How about bishop e7 check? Well, I'm hitting the queen and the king, so it only has one move, and that's queen takes e7. Well, what did I get out of that? I just lost a bishop. Well, you did get something out of that. What you got out of that was he's no longer threatening queen takes c3 check. He's no longer threatening queen takes f2 check. He's no longer threatening knight takes f2. But that juicy rook on a8 is still hanging. And not only that, before I take that rook, I could throw in a move like either castle queenside check or rook d1 check. And that would actually help me even more, because after I check him, he can't play bishop d7 because of queen takes a8 check. So let's go through that line again, just so you can visualize it. Bishop e7 check, forking the queen and the king. Queen takes e7 forced. Rook d1 check. And now bishop d7 is impossible because of queen takes a8 check. So therefore, he would have to move the king to guard the queen, because his king's the only guarder of the queen. So after bishop e7 check, queen e7, rook d1 check, he'd have to play king e7, king e8. And then when I play queen takes a8, I'm hitting the pinned bishop on c8. Or if I don't like that, I can play bishop e7 check, queen e7, queen takes a8, and he's not threatening anything. If he goes back to f6, then maybe I could play my queen back to f3 again and stop him just like I would on the first move with f3, queen f3. So bishop e7 check, queen takes e7, queen takes a8, queen f6, queen f3, I'm okay. All right, so I'd have to spend a little more time on this. And I don't really need to determine after bishop e7 check, queen e7, whether rook d1 check is better than queen takes a8. All I have to do is determine that bishop e7 check is better than queen f3 or queen d4. And if it is, and I don't see any other candidates, then that's going to be my move. So it's going to be kind of a deflection to get that rook on a8. Okay, so it turns out if you give the computer this position, the best move, believe it or not, if you let a good computer think for a long time, is bishop to b4. Just letting black take on f7 check. Because after he does and white plays king d1, white's now threatening queen takes a8 and queen e7 mate. And white is actually winning here. But a human wouldn't do that. A human would just play bishop e7 check, which gives white a nice advantage. A human wouldn't look for a crazy computer move like bishop to b4. In this position, I would hardly even make that a candidate move. And it turns out, according to Stockfish 10, that's the best move. But it's not a lot better than bishop e7 check. And when I give this position to good players, they almost all play bishop e7 check, and nobody pays much attention to bishop b4. You know, humans think differently than computers. All right, so we've talked about our 5 steps. And these are, again, not steps that you would really necessarily sit there and say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. But they are necessary parts of any good thought process. What are all the things he's trying to do, including what are all the things his last move does? What are all the things I'm trying to do? What candidate moves do things according to those ideas? Which moves are safe? And then the hard part, which is, you know, what's going to happen after each one? I need to do analysis. I need to do evaluation. I need to work on my visualization so I can do that analysis. And then I got to determine which one will lead me to the best position. That's the hard part, way beyond the scope of today's video, but you got to start somewhere. Okay, for my YouTube channel, hopefully if you like my videos, you'll subscribe. This is my 5th video in the series. Hopefully I can do 1 or 2 a week and build up a big library of good stuff. And, you know, stuff on thought process, we can just go on and on and on and on about all kinds of good things about thought process. This is one of those. Okay. Hope you enjoyed it. This is Dan Heisman. We'll see you next time. Bye.